Welcome back to We the People. We share Montreal's interview series with players and contributors to the collaborative ecosystem here in Montreal. We are here today with Chris Jack, who has been a part of Sensorica for some time now, and we are going to get to know him and learn a bit about this project. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Stephanie.
Thank you for coming in. Well, tell me, what brought you to the collaborative economy and really what motivates you to participate in it and to contribute time and energy to it?
What brought me to the idea or the concept of collaborative economies was community associations, community organizations, and essentially community radio, which is where I started when I was at the University of Ottawa. And that is a little bit of a sidestep, but it's definitely connected. Community radio is a great place to foster collaborative economies, but also just community projects, community-based organizations. It fosters them and it also talks about them and keeps them top of mind for its listeners. So it's a good place to get started. I was aware of some collaborative initiatives, some Montreal-based collaborative organizations, and I wanted to not only find out a little bit more, I was curious, but also maybe get involved. I was looking for a new way of doing things. I was working in a company in a very specific role and looking for a way to be creative and have that creativity and value recognized in a different way, in a different economic model.
And so that sounds like there's some displeasure with the current economic model in your mind.
Yeah, I really think that collaborative economies, participatory economies are a wholesale rejection of what exists currently. It's a little bit of a disruption, but it's disputing what exists currently in our economic model. There is a rejection of what or how the current economy values labor and people and human capital. So the current economy puts a value on those things and equates that into currency, equates that into money, essentially. And I feel that there are a lot of people around the world that see themselves as holders of more value than what money represents. Not only that, but there's also a need currently in society to be able to not go through a third-party entity to complete an exchange or collaboration on something. I don't want to get into specifics. There's a lot of examples out there, but essentially that means it's a rejection of the banking fees, the lender fees that exist at the top of Wall Street that were central to the subprime mortgage scandal. It means frictionless currencies or frictionless collaboration. It means if I want to do business with you, if I want to collaborate with you on something, if I want to exchange something with you, it means that I don't want to go through a third party to be able to do it. It speaks to the localness of these new types of enterprises and new types of collaborations. It also speaks to the concept that people have a lot more to give than what they're being recognized for at their current jobs, essentially. So it's a frustration with that economic model as much as anything else.
And I think it also is the trust that people want to feel and recognize more on a person-to-person basis as opposed to the corporations and their personhood or otherwise.
Sure, yeah. Trust, security, data security, for example, is weighing on people's minds, I think. Ownership, data ownership, open data in general is something that's also pretty highly thought of at the moment. I think all of those things, they also speak to the idea that is being fostered in the altcoin communities as well. So they, at the very least, alternative currencies are responding to a need for an exchange currency that is not necessarily within the capitalist system.
And hopefully perhaps more resilient. Certainly times will change and people want to feel like they have more control over their futures and their day-to-day subsistence.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do want to have more control over how they work, how they are remunerated, and how much of an impact they have on the planet, on other people, on other economies around the world, which is really one of the dark sides of the free market economy and how businesses within that economic structure work. So how much can I influence in my day-to-day choices? How much can I prevent other people from suffering in my day-to-day choices? How much less of an impact can I have on the environment with my choices? Yeah, ownership of all of those things is key.
Well, tell me more about Sensorica's model and how it's taking some of those principles into account and what it is.
So Sensorica is unique in some senses in Montreal in that it is perhaps the only makerspace that I know of that tends to operate along the OVN or Open Value Network principle. And Open Value Network or networks are a forum for people to contribute to the tasks involved in the production of goods or services without operating within a standard hierarchy. So what that means is that people can take ownership for a task without necessarily being accredited by a university to work on that task. For example, if I was looking at testing a circuit controller or an Arduino board or identifying the steps towards the production of that precision sensor, I can get my feet wet at Sensorica and work on those types of projects without being told that I don't have the education to do it. So in other words, it is fed by the open hardware community. It's fed by the Arduino community. It's fed by GitHub community. All these things are tools towards the production of goods and statements of work on a task-by-task basis that actually can produce revenues and can bring revenues back to people involved in those projects. It's essentially a transparent forum in which both the client or the person that has contracted an organization like Sensorica and the individuals, collaborators, participants in the Sensorica network can work on a project and see the tasks being completed on a real-time basis with a true accounting of the work involved. And then on the back end, it's also a way to remunerate people for work that doesn't involve a top-down hierarchy. So it's a way for people to make real money in largely experimental sense.
Sounds very democratic.
Yeah, there's a lot of democracy involved there, and I think there's a lot of sharing of knowledge. It's an open knowledge base, it's an open data set, so democracy in that sense.
Definitely sounds unique to me, and I think part of that radicalization of how we look at economies. What kind of impact does Sensorica aim to have in Montreal or in the engineering communities or affecting the world in general?
I think promoting the awareness that these types of economic models and value networks can provide a viable alternative to going to a public tender sort of option. The traditional way that companies get engineering work done is by going out to tender and then having multiple companies bid on that. And then the companies take that work and it does that behind closed doors. And it regularly updates the client on the work that's been done over the telephone, but in very broad strokes, as opposed to literally providing them an access to a detailed statement of work on what's been done this minute by this person. So creating awareness of this as a viable alternative model to the standard contractual model, then that's what Sensorica is aiming to do. If I was going to push your listeners to anything in terms of a typical Sensorica project, it would be the photovoltaic characterization project we have on the Sensorica web. That was perhaps the first time that an accredited university, Canadian university, contracted a commons-based peer production entity to produce a good that involved an open value accounting system and involved a product largely for a graduate level academic network. That should give a great example of what Sensorica is all about. Also, I think if Sensorica wants anything more than that is to get more people involved in the Sensorica initiatives and networks. We're only as strong as our collaborators. We're only as strong as the people that put time into projects and the people that work on projects. It's a great place to be able to test out your knowledge, and it's a great place to be able to work on things that you heretofore had not had access to in a space that has all the tools to give you access to those types of projects. If I think about the broader picture, I think that Sensorica wants to help to drive the collaborative economy forward, especially in Montreal.
That would be well appreciated. It's definitely our goal as OuiShare to really foster and support all the different ways that Quebecers and residents of Montreal are trying to instill and maintain the collaborative values and principles and the redefining of how we consume and interact and work. So in terms of this next level of what OuiShare and Sensorica are aiming to promote and to bring awareness to, how do you see those challenges being ones that we could help face together, or what those challenges will bring with them as we try to grow use of, to attract users to all of the various ways that people can cooperate and collaborate together? How do we make this more of a reality and more of a viable option for people?
Well, I think it'd be useful to define some of the challenges, and I know that I can't speak for OuiShare, so I'll speak for Sensorica. Some of our challenges are based in how people perceive value currently, so how they work for money, get money, and perceive their value as only linked to that type of currency. That's a challenge. And how we can overcome that is by raising awareness that collaborative economies in general are viable alternatives to that existing type of work, that existing type of value creation. So that's an awareness challenge, that's a community outreach challenge, and it's a paradigm shift in the sense that people currently only know one thing and can't necessarily see another option, another alternative working. So the challenge is also to be able to translate all of these definitions of new economies, participatory economies, collaborative economies into something digestible, something that appeals to people, and also something that makes sense, something that's logical. That's largely a messaging issue. OuiShare knows this challenge more than anybody else. And where can we go with all this? Where can we get to? I think we can get to collaborative economies or commons-based peer production models of doing business as a viable alternative to the current economic model, as another way of doing business. I think we can see alternative currencies or altcoins as another currency option to what we have now. And I think we can expand on people's definition of what they consider to be their value. And that is the best of all possible outcomes. If we can do that, if we can change their perception of how valuable they actually are, then I think we've won.
I like the words that kept coming up as options. That there are options to how you define your value, that there are options for how you choose to work and consume and do things with other people, that it's really about adding tools to the tool belt and having people make informed choices about what tool they could or should use. I think that's a nice way of framing this PR marketing campaign that we're going to have to launch.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, one final question for you. In terms of some other initiatives in Montreal, do you have others that really inspire you, that you would like to work more together? Where do you see other ways of collaborating happening for you or for Sensorica?
Well, I'm a big fan of the concept of Jack of all trades universe. Vers Montréal is a concern that I work towards on a weekly basis. I'm already part of that organization, so the reduction of fossil fuels on the island of Montreal, largely an initiative by the community, but also a public consultation from the city of Montreal. I'd like to see that continuing. I'd like to see models like that continuing in general. I'd like to see the city consulting its citizens or consulting community groups on a regular basis. And I think those organizations, there's a lot of people that are interested in working within that mantle, and they like that concept. So I'd like to see more organizations working towards those models. I like that OuiShare is expanded to Montreal, because I think that's also a great organization and also something that can capture people's attention and has in the past. All of the co-working spaces around the island of Montreal, I think that they foster a lot of collaboration and a lot of innovation as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's a very strong presence of working together and the citizens engaging in Montreal that we definitely want to keep fostering and strengthening. Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking with us today. It's been a pleasure delving into this with you.
Thanks, Stephanie.